Hello everyone. Today on the subject of industrial biotechnology, we are going to study about the different paradigm of bioethics. The objective of this lecture is to make you understand what are the differences in the paradigms of bioethics and how bioethics is certainly related to these paradigms. So the correct introduction is also very important to these things. So, the outcome of this lecture will be you to understand the different aspects and what are the essential things that are inculcated in the paradigms of bioethics. So, bioethics. Let's start with the basics. What is bioethics? Ethics is a philosophical discipline pertaining to notions of good and bad, right and wrong, our moral life in community. So you have to see the moral of the life. Okay. So ethics is a philosophical terminology where a person or an individual is somewhat focused to differentiate in between uh, the right and wrong, the good and bad. So the person should reach such a level in the philosophical thinking that he or she is able to differentiate between the two facts. Bioethics is the application of ethics to the field of medicine and healthcare. Right. So, somewhat we are always trying to apply ethics to the field of science and technology. Okay. Especially, there has been a lot of trouble with the field of biotechnology, the experimentations, the scenarios which they bring into the public. It has led to a lot of outrage in the recent past. So there has to be some sort of solution in order to simplify the things, so that they can really easily be understood by the individuals who are not scientific in nature, or the individuals who are not at all having the scientific logical thinking, or they are just lame, right? So, bioethic is the application of ethics to the field of medicine and healthcare. Ethicists and bioethicists ask relevant questions more than provide sure and certain answers. So, the problem that the scientific community always faces is that whenever there is a meeting between ethicists and scientists, there is a major issue in between the communication. Okay. Uh, Rather than providing a certain answer, they ask a lot of questions to the scientist. Okay, how it is done, why it is done, what it will be having as a side effect, and all those things. So there has to be some ground, no man's ground, in between the two communities. Okay, because the two communities, they do not stand each other, right, and they do not readily understand the thinking of each other. So that is why the bioethics is a totally different field. That is why we are explaining it to you. It is somewhat related, more related to the philosophical thinking than it comes towards the scientific thinking, right? So it is also transforming itself, and scientific community is also transforming itself. So the both the fields are going through major changes in their uh, field of thinking or their think tanks. So this is how our future will be shaped, and this is how in next century you can expect somewhat major changes. What is the right thing to do and the good way to be? What is worthwhile? What are our obligations to one another? Who is responsible to whom and for what? What is the fitting response to this moral dilemma? Give the context in which it arises. On what moral grounds are such claims made? So they ask a lot of questions, and scientists they always have to defend their researches and while answering these questions. So bioethicists ask these questions in the context of modern medicine and healthcare. Okay, they draw on pluralistic plethora of traditions, both secular and religious, to spawn civil discourse on continuous issues of moral differences and others on which the most people agree. So they bioethicists what they do when it comes to the discussion with the scientific community, they are somewhat who are representing both the secular and religious parties. Okay, and this is a pluralistic plethora that they create when it comes to the medicines, when it comes to the biotechnology, when it comes to the industrial biotechnology, and everything. They do ask a lot of questions, and you have to clarify the things. And it is somewhat a civil discourse because you being a member of scientific community, scientists always have to elaborate their research in a very common language or layman's language so that common people can understand the aspects clearly. Bioethicists foster public knowledge and comprehensions both of moral philosophy and scientific advances in healthcare. So what they foster public knowledge and comprehension, explaining both moral and scientific advances in healthcare. So they are trying to somewhat strike a balance between the scientific thinking and somewhat religious and common thinking. Okay, where the individuals are not at all that much scientifically aware of the recent researches. They note how medical technology can change the way we experience the meaning of health and illness, and ultimately the way we live and die. Okay, so in the recent past, the things were not that much advanced. Okay, if you go 100 years back, there were no antibiotics, there were no painkillers, there were no solution for diseases, and many of these things were there. So people used to die with common diseases. People used to die with very simple infections. But as the science progressed and biotechnology made its progress and industrial biotechnology established itself, then uh, the whole scenario changed. Okay, now we have antibiotics, now we have vaccinations, okay, vaccines, and everything. So, with the help of these things, everything has been going through a lot of change, right? A lot of change in the sense that everything is somewhat related to the scenario of logic. Okay, what scientists are trying to do, scientists are always trying to make the life easier. Okay, to search for the cure of diseases, to cure the diseases. Okay, to reduce the symptoms, and all these things in a very substantial manner. But somewhat they always have to satisfy the questions and the claims of bioethicists. So are these things um, expected to be religiously right? Treatments is up to the mark. Medicine and healthcare are somewhat not uh, exploiting the people or the individual interest. For the individual interest, they are exploiting some living organisms, okay, or animals, or mistreating any other organism, right? So, somewhat this is the main discourse is that it is a huge debate, and from time to time, these two communities they sit together whenever there is a big research, whenever there is a big discourse, then these explanations are required. Bioethics ethics is multidisciplinary. It blends philosophy, theology, history, and law with medicine, nursing, health policy, and the medical humanities. Insight from various disciplines are brought to bear on the complex interaction of human life, science, and technology. Right. So, what they are trying to do, they are trying to blend in many different subjects. Right. Because most of the time, the scientific community that we have is somewhat much more focused on its own thinking and its own experimentation and its own research. And but what the bioethicists bring to the table, they also bring philosophical thinking, theology, history, and law that is combined with many other things like science and technology. So it is a blend. So you have to answer the questions that not only arises from the scientific point of view, but also from the point of view of philosophy, theology, and history and law. So scientific community always have to justify the situation so that it is readily be understood by the common people, and it is also ethically correct. Although its questions are as old as humankind, the origins of bioethics as a field are more recent and difficult to capture in a single view. So bioethics is a multi-dimensional subject. Okay, you cannot catch the things and keep it in a cage, right? It is a huge topic, it is a huge field, and it has many different types of scenarios depending on the field of interest. When the term bioethics was first coined in 1971, some say that University of Wisconsin professor Van Rensselaer Potter, others by fellow of the Kennedy Institute in Washington D.C. It may be a, it may have signified merely the combination of biology and bioscience with humanistic knowledge. So it is known that bioethics term came into existence during the year 1971. However, the field of bioethics now encompasses uh, a full range of concern from difficult private decisions made in clinical settings to controversies surrounding technology and allocation of scarce resources. So they cover each and every topic of science and technology nowadays. Earlier it was not possible, but nowadays the bioethicists they are trying to cover as much uh, 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 as much as research is possible, and they do ask questions when it comes to the involvement of humans. That these things should strike a perfect balance with the society and religion and other moral thinkings. What does bioethics accomplish? Interdisciplinary dialogue contributes to the field's unique merit by applying the foundational disciplines of philosophy and theology and incorporating perspectives from various other disciplines, including sociology, medicine, nursing, anthropology, and law. So, this thing is quite different. Okay, these things are somewhat much more advanced. Okay, because they are coming into contact with different fields of science. Okay, one like in scientific knowledge or scientific thinking, one individual is only a subject expert of one thing. He or she cannot grasp so many subjects altogether. But when it comes to bioethics, they blend in together many different fields and combine them with the law also. So it is a cocktail of things that the people with scientific thinking have to deal with. Significant questions are addressed in bioethics. The ends and purposes of the life sciences and healthcare. The meanings and implications of distributive justice. and issues in global healthcare. So yeah, you have to look into matter with all the wide varieties of angles. Okay, bioethicists explore even deeper issues such as the meaning of life and death, pain and suffering, and rights and responsibilities. So they are exploring every possible aspect, which is a topic of concern. As the field continues to evolve, bioethics has become a prominent force in legalization and public policy and in other practical applications of theoretical principles. So, what they are trying to explain is that every time the things are changing, and every time they are blending new fields with philosophy, with theology, with religion, with secularism, and also bringing in the laws, history. Okay, so it just forms a cocktail that is very much indifferent for the scientific community. And the scientific community has to answer many questions that arises with the bioethics. So those people, the bioethicists, they ask many questions, and scientific community has to deal with them readily. Rights, legal rights. When it comes to paradigms, there are many things that are come that comes under the umbrella of paradigms. Legal rights are claims that would be currently backed by the law if the case went to court. See, if anyone has claimed the laws or the of, on some scientific venture, then the things will come under the law. So these are the things that are very different in nature. While human rights are critical to maintaining human dignity, but may not have yet attained legal recognition. So human rights and human dignity are also very important aspects. You have to look into the matter of and inculcate those points also. The recognition of human rights has changed the situation in many countries, and many countries in the world have signed the UN Declaration of Human Rights in the year 1985, or one of the regional versions of this. This can be applied to many situations. For example, we all have a right to be involved in decisions about our country, the freedom of religion or speech, to raise a family, to share in the benefits arising from scientific advances, and a right to be reasonable to a reasonable future. So, although democracy is claiming all these things, but in reality, um, uh, these things do happen or not? This is the main question. So, having some things on paper and having these things in reality is somewhat a different aspect, right? Respect for personal rights should change the nature of relationship between people in power and people without power from being characterized by authoritarianism or uh, paternalism to becoming a partnership. Ethics uh, is not the same as law. It is readily be understood that it is combination of different fields. Ethics is higher pursuit. So pursuit is higher, doing more than the law requires. The law is needed to protect the people and to set a minimum standard, but you cannot determine good moral behavior by settling cases in a court of law. We only need to think of medical litigation or environmental damage penalties, which can lead to huge sums of money being paid for the accidents or negligence which cannot really be compensated by monetary refunding. Okay, the solution is to have more careful and more physicians, companies, and politicians, and the replacement of monetary balance sheets by ethical values, such as primary motive of decision making. So, ethics try to involve everyone into the system. Okay, and everything has to be transparent to the public, from where the money is being invested to what are the things they are going to experience it, how justified the situation is. Beneficence. One of the underlying philosophical ideas of society is to pursue progress. The most cited justification for this is the pursuit of uh, improved medicine and health. So you must take into the consideration that whatever the situation is, whatever the scenario is, uh, the things which should be worked upon for the betterment of the health of every individual, for the betterment of the medicine, and improvement in the technology that is life saving. It has often assumed that it is better to attempt to do good than to try not to do harm. Failure to attempt to do good, working for people's best interest, is taken to be a sin of omission. Okay, so every time you have to work for the benefit of the people, right? And you should always do good to the humanity, you should work in their favor. But when people are not working like that, they are working for their individual interest, then the condition changes. Beneficence is the impetus for further research into ways of improving health and agriculture and for protecting the environment. So we should simultaneously work in every field. We should also improve the agriculture and protect all simultaneously protect the environment, but also improve the health and medical conditions simultaneously. Beneficiaries support the concept of experimentation if it is performed to lead possible benefits. The term beneficence suggests more than actions of mercy, for which uh, charity would be a better term. The principle of beneficence uh, asserts an obligation to help others further their important and legitimate interests. So what they are trying to do, or they are trying to legitimize each and every aspect that is being worked upon. Okay, uh, it should be done in order to get the possible benefits to the public and nothing else. It means that if you see someone drawing, providing you can swim, you have to try to help them by jumping in the water with them. It also includes the weighing of risk to avoid doing harm. So beneficence also asserts an obligation upon those who possess life-saving technology in medicine or agriculture to share their technology with others who need it. Okay, so if you have the technology, if you have the medicine that can readily save life, so you should avoid doing black marketing or artificially inflating the price. Okay, so you all have to work somewhere to serve the humanity on all bases. This is relevant to biotechnology companies also, who may hold patent rights on particular processes. Beneficiaries would assert that they must share it with others even if cannot pay for it. This may mean that companies share developments with developing countries, or give new drugs to individuals too poor to purchase them. So it is somewhat serving the humanity on moral basis, okay, and serving the humanity without uh, obtaining profit from them. Do no harm, okay. The laws of society generally attempt to penalize the people who do harm, even if motive was to do good. So, whenever there is some scientific research or scientific evidence of new matter, so you have to look into the context that everything is according to the bioethics, because later on they will all ask the questions and you have to answer them, right? So, what does it signify? It signifies that uh, whenever you are doing some sort of experimentations or you are developing new technology, you have to look into the matter that you do no harm to anyone. Okay, uh, there needs to be a balance between two these two principles, and it is very relevant to areas of science and technology where we can expect both benefits and risks. Importantly, we must balance risk versus benefits of different and often alternative technologies. Then apply these comparisons to our own behavior as well as in determining government policies. So both the parties should be benefited and no harm to be done to any party or any living form of organisms. For the benefit of humans, you cannot just go out and exploit any living form substantially. Do no harm is a very broad term, but is the basis for the principles of justice and confidentiality and philanthropy. So, if you are a philanthropist and your thinking is different, but you are also doing some sort of business or scientific work, so you have to look into the matter of philanthropy. Okay, so your philanthropy in just simple terms means to serve the humanity. Okay, you are also serving the humanity without uh, any expectations, without any profits, and you have already made a significant contribution, and you have already earned that X amount of profit that is required for you. So it is your duty, being a scientist or being a um, medical health professional, that you have to serve the humanity after a certain period of time, and also maintain the justice and confidentiality. It can also be expressed as respect for human life and integrity. Because in modern days, in especially in developing countries, the problem that is arising is that integrity is never present in those countries. Okay, those who are suffering from health emergencies. Okay, and they don't have any value for human life. So these two values, in comparison to the developed countries, they do value human life and they do have integrity with their professionals and with the system. So somewhat these developing countries these days are missing such scenarios. Okay, so they have to learn these things and they have to inculcate these scenarios uh, with their systems and with their people, right? So this feature is found in the Hippocratic tradition and all other traditions of medical and general ethics. To do no harm is expressed more at an individual level, whereas justice is the expression of this concept at societal level. Do no harm has been called the principle of uh, nominal effiance justice. Those who claim that individual autonomy comes above uh, societal interest needs to remember that the reason for protecting society is because it involves many human lives which must all be respected. Whenever you are dealing with such scenario, you must have a great value for human life and you have good concern with ethics, okay, and also the integrity for these things. So it can help in the long term. Individual freedom is limited by respect for the autonomy for all other individuals in society and the world. So individual freedom also plays a lot of role, right? So autonomy is also important all the other individuals. So whenever you are having a fair system, okay, where each and every individual is treated with justice, the people will have a lot of trust in you, in a lot of trust in your services, a lot of trust in your technology. If your system is transparent, people's well-being should be promoted and their values and choices respected, but equally, which places limits on the pursuit of individual autonomy. So these laws also give freedom, but they also impose some sort of confinement on the individuals. Okay, you have freedom on such and such things, but you also have to perform such and such duty. So it is striking a perfect balance in between the two. We also need to consider interest of future generations, which places limits on this generation's autonomy. We also need to apply this principle globally as discussed above. No single country should pursue policies which harm people of any country. Whether it's medicine, whether it's biotechnology, whether it's anything like experimental medicines. Okay, people they transport it to another country and give it as a symbolic representation of serving humanity, but in reality, they are testing medicine, their medicines that how the individuals are going to respond to it, right? So, nations are always supposed to behave in a justified manner. Okay, even if they are exporting their services or their technology, medicines, and anything that is being manufactured with the help of industrial biotechnology, it should not be experimented on the people of other country, and you should always act in a very uh, well-defined manner and with integrity. The key principle arising from the high value of human life is respect for autonomy of each individual human being. Okay, this means they should have the freedom to decide major issues regarding their life and is behind the idea of human rights. This idea is found in many religions also. So the main purpose is that we should always serve the humanity and we should always care for humanity, irrespective of their religions. Part of autonomy is some freedom to decide what to do, as long as it does not harm others, also called individual liberty or privacy. Well-being include the principles of do not harm or do no harm to people and to work for people's best interests. Confidentiality. So, maintenance of confidentiality is also very important. Emphasis on confidentiality is very important. Personal information should be private. Uh, there may be some exceptions when a criminal activity is involved or when third parties are at direct risk of avoidable harm. It is very difficult to develop good criteria for exceptions, and they will remain rare. We must be careful when using computer data banks that contain personal information, and if they cannot be kept confidential, the information should not be entered to such a bank. So, whenever you are providing your data to the banks and all those things, you should make sure the information is very very confidential. Okay, if the information is being leaked, whether it's scientific experimentation procedures or any other thing, then these things should not be practiced. A feature of the ethical use of new genetics is the privacy of genetic information. Okay, while in scientific community you are performing some experiments on genetics, and it is your also responsibility to keep this information as private as possible. This is one of the residual features of the existing medical tradition that needs to be reinforced. So, medical traditions, if you have testing reports of many individuals, so you must keep the data a secret. It is not only because of respect for people's autonomy, but it is also needed to retain trust with people. If we break a person's confidence, then we cannot be trusted. Okay, if any firm or any company or any scientific organization is breaking the trust of the people, then it will be subjected under the confidentiality acts. If medical insurance companies try to take only low risk clients by pre screening the applicants, there should be the right to refuse such questions. Okay, like medical health insurance company, uh, they do the health insurance to the individuals who have no medical complications or no such risks. The only way to ensure proper and just healthcare is to enforce this on employers and ensure companies, or what is a better solution, a national healthcare system allowing all access to free and equal medical treatment. So, medical health insurance should be available for everyone, and each individual should get free and equal access to medical treatment. There should be no discrimination between rich and poor. We need to protect individuals from discrimination that may come in an imperfect world, one that does not hold justice as its benefit. Ethical limits of biotechnology, absolute or relative. Like, we can ask whether there should be an absolute ban on certain applications, right, such as sex selection or germline gene therapy. Such bans are only justified when there is a clear risk of social harm. There are other areas of biotechnology where there clearly a, should not be an absolute ban, as in the use of genetic engineering on any organisms. And there is some conditional bans imposed, such as the guidelines to protect human subjects from unconsented experimentations or dangerous experimentations. Okay, so you cannot impose such dangerous experimentation without the concern of that very individual. Some would call for the ban on experimentation using animals, and for the proportion supporting such a ban on primates is significant. So, like in India, we have individual bodies. If you want to perform experimentation, then you have to take permission from a central committee for that. And for performing experimentation on small animals like mice and guinea pigs, you can get permission from that uh, state authority. Laws may be introduced to impose absolute or conditional bans on some research, and this is needed at least in some areas. Everyone is subjected to laws, and scientists should not expect to exempt. Laws, as said above, may not always be ethical. They may be relative, as public opinion is not always reflecting an ethical view, and there may not even be an absolute ethically correct answer. Is there a clear distinction between diseases and non-disease, which may determine whether prenatal genetic screening and selective abortion is ethical or not? This is the uh, major issue with the public and scientific community, and bioethics has to look into the matter for these things. At extremes, there is, but there are gray areas in the middle, and we must ask how to regulate this. Do we impose absolute limits, or do we take up the principle of autonomy and allow women to what uh, decide what is a disease or not? The ideal would be to allow women a completely free choice in the abortion of the disease markers they want to use, and that they would responsibly do this. However, abuses may occur, sometimes due to social forces upon the women, such as medical insurance companies' refusal to provide medical care to children suffering from disease who had a preventable birth. Such a decision will be shocking to some people, but in other cultures, a majority may be more pragmatic and it would not be as immoral. Can we have absolute limits? So, absolute or relative. We can ask whether there should be absolute ban on certain applications and other things. Timeless or transient. Our concept will change, and there is no guarantee that unethical applications will be made and even supported by future public majorities. We need to remember history and also may need to introduce some international laws which make it more difficult for future unethical uses to occur. However, we need to be flexible. As we gather experience, we may need less stringent regulations, as in the case of release of GMO or gene therapy. Biotechnology has had a positive effect on the debate of bioethics, and we must ensure that debate matures and is applied more widely to other technologies, old or new. The introduction of new technologies may even be necessary to change general patterns of ethical and social thinking. For some example, the introduction of non-directive genetic counseling that is associated with genetic screening could hasten the introduction of the concept of informed consent into general medical practice. criteria to assess whether biotechnology research is ethical. We think some summary criteria which may be useful in determining whether any given applications of biotechnology is ethical. Although it is possible to develop useful numerical scoring systems, such as being attempted for animal experiments, they are still only only guides and may be more useful in directing attention to the better and more ethical designs of experiments. Therefore, only some criteria important to assess the ethnicity of an experiment or applications which are given here. What is the benefit to whom? Is it life saving? Human benefit is greater than monetary benefit. Do no harm to humans, which is unacceptable level of risk. Follow ethical codes on free and informed consent for human experimentation. Do not cause pain. Protect animal rights as far as possible. Use less sentient animals for research and develop non animal alternatives. Do no harm to the environment. Use the technology that is most environmentally sustainable over the long term. Minimize consumption. May need to introduce environmental quotas to do this according to just distribution of global assets and introduce maximum levels of for individual production or pollution. Protect biodiversity. Protect endangered species. Allow farmers affordable or free access to breeding stocks and encourage planting of diverse crops. Justice to all people and future generations. Share benefits and risks. Independent, open decision making on safety questions. Consider ethical and social impact. Inform and educate the public and scientists about all dimensions of the projects scientific, social, economic, and ethical using third party media. So, the final conclusion is that we need to understand that perception of the impacts of technology are more complex than simple perception of benefit or risk, as they should be. The capacity to balance benefit and risk of alternative technology while respecting human autonomy and justice and the environment while simultaneously being under a continual influence of commercial advertisements and media stories of varying quality and persuasion may prove to be an important indicator of the social and bioethical maturity of a society. In addition to develop the bioethical maturity of society, global human rights need to be increasingly respected so that we get social progress as well as scientific progress. All people should equally share both the benefits of new technology and the risk of its development. So these are the MCQs. GEAC stands for Genetically Engineered Approval, Genetical Ethical Committee, Genetic Engineering Commission, Genetic Ethical Approval Committee. The correct answer is D, Genetic Engineering Approval Committee. Dash is the right granted by a government to an inventor to prevent others from the commercial use of his invention. The correct answer is patients. Patents. The patents are granted for biological entities and the product derived from them are called dash. The correct answer is biopatents. Dash includes rules of conduct that may be used to regulate our activities concerning the biological world. The correct answer is C. Bioethics. GEAC makes decisions regarding the validity and safety of dash organisms. A. The correct answer is A. Genetically modified organisms. Which committee has been set to keep a check on GM research and GM products? The correct answer is GEAC. The manipulation of the human race goes further with the help of dash. The correct answer is D. Regulation. A. Dash stands are required. Dash standards are required to evaluate the morality of all human activities. The correct answer is C. Ethical standards. Various measures taken to prevent any risk to normal organisms from transgenic organisms are known as dash. The correct answer is biosafety. GEAC is set up by dash government. The correct answer is Indian government. These are the references from where we have collected the material, and thank you very much for listening to my lecture.